arrogant about his roots and where he come from. Born in New Orleans, but he still got that little blood in him that comes from across the Atlantic Ocean.
Look at Nelson Mandela. You start a drum and Mandela moves, you know. I think that's an authentic African tradition, which coming from New Orleans, we never really lost. I mean, it's a part of our funeral ceremonies. And I always said, you know, whenever I die, wherever it is, I want a New Orleans band to be there. And I want people to, you know, dance back from the grave and say, you know, yeah, he did it all.
There is the public, dignified statesman, Andrew Young.
Andy was the most effective single person in changing Rhodesia into Zimbabwe.
Carter is man in Africa, really, for Africa. The man we worked with, the man who came to Dar es Salaam from time to time, and I sat down with him, was Andy Young. That is the man who made it.
And there is also the private, often surprising friend and family man, Andy.
Before he became a congressman, I had the hardest time answering the question, what does your father do? I mean, it was so hard for me to tell people. First of all, I wasn't really sure all of the time what he was doing.
He's everybody's brother. He's everybody's father in many ways, but he's everybody's brother.
Oh, he's a dancer. He is a great dancer. He really is. He sings too now. He really, I mean, he doesn't have the world's greatest voice, but if you ask him to sing, he sings in a lot of the blues songs.
Baby, meet me with your black drawers on, or none at all.
Meet me, baby, with your black drawers on. That's a classic New Orleans blues. I mean, that's what I grew up on. And that was what my mother and father didn't want me to play.
His successful protective parents raised their eldest boy like a young Louisiana prince. He was expected to follow his father's footsteps as a dentist and a quiet pillar of the community. But at Howard University in Washington, Andy spent most of his time making new friends and majoring in partying 101.
I didn't get along with teachers. I was always talking back and asking questions and challenging authority. When my parents came up to my graduation, I was scared to death, because if I'd made one more D, I would have flunked out instead of graduating. And I knew I had wasted an incredible opportunity.
He headed for home, and a few days later, the young track athlete went for a long, self-punishing run that ended on a mountaintop and a newfound, inexplicable peace.
I looked out and everything suddenly made sense. Everything in the world seemed to have purpose. And it was sort of the beauty of nature, but I couldn't conceive of maybe there not being a purpose for me.
He found that purpose quickly. The dashing Andy Young decided to become the Reverend Young and spent the next 3 years attending the Hartford Seminary in Connecticut. He met and married a bright, beautiful young woman named Jean Childs. Over the years, they would have 3 girls, Andrea, Lisa, and Paula, and a boy, Andrew Jr. or Beau. They would have 4 decades together before she succumbed to cancer. Guided by what he called blind faith, Andy would devote his life to ending the suffering of others. If necessary, one person at a time.
This march intends to keep off the highway. We will be marching on the shoulder of the road.
He came to a realization that would shape the rest of his life, that racism and poverty were not only morally wrong, they were often the same.
The racism that we talk about, whether it's in welfare communities, in skinheads and hate crimes. It's all poverty.
We have the right to walk the highway.
In the early 1960s, he joined Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. on the front lines of the civil rights battlefield. Andy took bloody, direct hits, but he never dreamed of hitting back.
This is a revolution that won't fire a shot. We won't break a window. We won't even curse anybody. We only come with the power of our souls and the presence of our bodies to love the hell out of the state of Alabama.
And then, one terrible day in Memphis, a fatal shot was fired. His dear friend, Martin, was dead.
We used to always joke that people were going to be shooting at him and get me, and then he'd preach my funeral.
Gentlemen, this is, as you can imagine, a very sad occasion for us, but it's an occasion that Dr. King himself anticipated. For not long after we left Selma, Dr. King realized that every day his life was under threat.
As he grieved, Andy remembered his and Martin's countless nights on the road, away from their families. Now, he made sure that his friends' children continued to know their father's love.
After Martin's death, Andy would come by and visit with the children. You know, so it's hard, he said, to be a father. It is. It's hard to be a parent when you have to give so much to the world. And that's, you know, what he struggled with, because I saw my husband struggle with the same thing. And you know, he says, you never feel that you've done a good job. You never feel that you're good enough.
I call on him and he'll say, well, Martin, you know, one of the things that you have to always do, and your father taught us this is what he says to me, is to find the best in people. I've never heard him say a negative word about anybody.
That decency, that sense of fairness and justice would become Andrew Young's consistent trademark throughout the world.
I'm Andrew Young, Congressman from the 5th Congressional District of Georgia.
As a U.S. Congressman from Georgia, fighting for economic equality as he'd fought for social justice.
I, Andrew Young, do solemnly swear.
As U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, supporting struggles for justice around the world, particularly in Africa.
I think we can't really assume the moral leadership that we need in the world in order to deal with problems like energy, the Middle East, everything else, unless we are aggressively pursuing majority rule in Southern Africa.
All of his life, Andrew Young had called this extraordinarily complex continent his motherland. As UN ambassador, he could now actively focus on what would be his lifelong commitment to helping Africans achieve their dreams of freedom, justice, and economic prosperity. A commitment shaped by first-hand experience and deep personal relationships.
I went to Zanzibar, met Nyerere and 22 other African leaders, and it gave me a perspective on Africa from African leaders themselves. We didn't have to subvert Africa. We could work with Africa. And those were then strange notions.
He can walk into almost any situation. He could one moment be with the CEO of Chevron, the next minute be in some village with 3 people who have been warring for 32 centuries. And Andy brings them together.
And later, even in supposedly domestic roles, such as mayor of Atlanta, private businessman, and chief architect of the city's successful bid for the 1996 Olympics, Andy kept the commitment to Africa and the dream of economic independence alive.
Africa matters. Africa matters because we really and truly are a people who care.
In April of 1998 in Atlanta, he helped organize the successful regional meeting of the National Summit on Africa.
We are changing. My continent is changing from Kenya right down to the Cape has elected governments.
It was part of a massive, unprecedented movement to reshape Americans' views of Africa and show them that our destinies and often our cultures are inextricably combined. Andy makes that point every chance he gets.
It's a natural for Africa.
Right.
You are wonderful. Please, I see you as another Martin Luther King.
A number of his long-term colleagues tell of business trips to Africa that had what can only be called Andy moments.
So there's this big fancy dinner, right? And we're all trying to be, kind of the ambassador is there from the U.S. and all this. He calls us up on stage and has us start singing Southern spirituals. Come on up here and sing. Come on up here and sing. I don't know, would we do this little light of mine? I don't know.
This little light of mine.
This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine.
March 28, 1996, Cape Town, South Africa. Andrew Young joyously married his new bride, Carolyn Watson of Georgia.
That's great. Great, you guys.
And now, back in Atlanta, as part of Andy's close-knit family, Carolyn can confirm certain fundamental things about her husband. That his commitment to Africa is unending. That, like today, he will constantly be resetting his internal clock after another trip to the motherland. But nonetheless, this same afternoon, he will attend his granddaughter's dance recital.
How you doing? Oh, you were good. Very good. How you doing? Okay. Good to see you.
Carolyn will continue to meet young men and women who are part of Andy's extended family, like Olu Obasanjo, whom Andy helped get into an Atlanta college when Olu's father, an old friend, was jailed in Nigeria as a political prisoner.
He is the kind of person who loves, who likes to do what's right. And if he sees that you're in need of something and if he is in a position to help at any time, he will be right there.
And Carolyn will marvel on this Sunday in Andy's church that despite all of those who love him, he is still humbled by today's dedication of Father's Day to him.
Because of all of the things that I've had in my portfolio, I think the most challenging and difficult one has been that of being a father. I have enjoyed it, but I don't know any father who's really happy with his fatherhood.
At the end of this day, if Andy Young harbored any lingering doubts that his worth as a father has suffered because of his efforts to save so many, one person at a time, those doubts were absolutely put to rest by his youngest child, his sometimes rebellious son, Bo.
At this point in my life, I think, for a 25-year-old young man, I'm doing okay. And when I look back, I really don't know how I got here. And I'm not sure where I'm going. But that blind faith that he instilled in me is still with me. And I think because of it, I'm gonna end up being somebody. And it's because of him. And it's because of those principles that I don't need a fancy car to be somebody. And I don't need somebody else to tell me that I'm somebody to be somebody. And I just do what I think is right, what I think God will want me to do. And I think he instilled that in all of my sisters. And we as his children are extremely proud of him.